Hello, homebrewed Christianity listeners. This is Tripp, and you're listening to this podcast, which makes me just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. This episode of the podcast, you're going to get to hear my conversation with Daniel Coleman about his new book, Presence and Process, A Path Toward Transformative Faith and Inclusive Community. This is a book that hooks contemplative tradition in Christianity with Buddhism and ties it together in a nice little bow of process theology. Boom. So hold on to your horses. That's who you're going to hear from. And before that, though, I want to tell you like three things. Three things. I don't know why I just sang that. I don't know. Probably because I had a little bit of extra coffee this morning. Well. I stayed up late. And Sarah Heath and Mike Morrell came over. And Alicia even stayed up past 9 o'clock. My wife goes to bed very early. And we stayed up late and started talking. And then I woke up and I had a lot of coffee. And now I'm feeling pretty excellent. I don't know why I told you all of that, but now you know. So the three things I was going to tell you is, one, this Advent, we're having a class of sorts, an online pop-up community, a collective of people looking for peace and resistance during Advent. That would be the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. I'm doing with Mike Morrell, my buddy, John Paplovich, and we're calling it Make Advent Great Again. Whoa, Tripp. Are you telling me that Advent was not already great? I'm telling you that there is a war on Advent. Yeah. You thought there was a war on Christmas. Nope. Luckily, we can all say Merry Christmas again. Face hurts. But there's a war on Advent. Christmas has been creeping in, trying to take those 12 days of Christmas and make them lead up to the 25th, and then doubled it, and then added a few more to how many ever days it was when I started hearing Christmas music. No, we're making Advent great again. We're going to wait. We're going to anticipate. We're going to beg for the arrival and coming of God. We're going to ask that question. Yeah, come. We're going to say come. A plea, a prayer. Yeah, we're going to focus on love, hope, peace, joy, all that Advent stuff. We're not going to sing joy to the world a whole bunch until Jesus' birthday. Christmas has been creeping in. That's why we're going to have to stop this creeping Christmas. Take it. War on Advent. In the war on Advent, we're going to make Advent great again. And every day you're going to get a different email if you're in the group from a different friend of mine, like Mickey Scope Jones, Robin Espinosa Henderson. Oh man, it's like if you go look at the list, it's a giant list of a bunch of my favorite people. Every day you'll get a new, different email with a different meditation for the day. You'll be in a group of people who are trying not to get overwhelmed and get all down on ourselves because of how the world's going currently. Maybe certain things going around. No, you want to be with a group of people that are like, no, we're ending this war on Advent. We're going to make Advent great again. And we are going to chill on the internet, get reflections. And then every week we're going to have a live video interactive experience. So you can go to makeadventgreatagain.com and you can sign up. The coolest thing is you pay whatever you want. You could donate, or you can just come in. You're like, I ain't got dough right now. Just because you ain't got dough, don't mean you can't join. Yeah, so go to makeadventgreatagain.com. I also think you could go to waronadvent.com. That's right. You may be saying to yourself, Tripp, did this idea come when you were sitting around, you had it, and then you just purchased URLs? Yes, it did. It did happen. There's already over 2,000 people that have signed up for this online pop-up community. So you're welcome to come, and you're welcome to come even if you don't like that we made fun of Make America Great Again. Some people are like, I don't like that at all. And that's fine. That's fine. I'm passing on saying anything else. I'm just going to tell you there's that and two other things. On December 7th, there's a live podcast in Winston-Salem, North Carolina with Bill Leonard. We're going to be talking about church history and his Homebrew Christianity Guide to Church History, which for some reason everyone in the world hasn't bought already. It's out. You should go buy it. like copies for all your friends for Christmas. Then on the 8th, that would be the 7th is a Thursday. On the 8th, the Friday, we're doing a live podcast in the Triangle again. Boom. And then on the 16th, we're going to be in Washington, D.C. Live Homebrewed Christianity podcast in Washington, D.C. with my friends, Crackers and Grape Juice. That's right. And if you come that Saturday to the podcast, it's very convenient. You may say, I live in Baltimore, I live in D.C., there's lots of travel, traffic, and all this kind of stuff. Well, we've thought of you. If you come on Saturday, December 16th, for the Crackers and Grape Juice Homebrewed Explosion, then I'm going to preach at Aldersgate United Methodist Church for their Saturday evening service. Then there's going to be a happy hour. Then there's going to be the podcast. So if you're saying to yourself, Tripp, look, there's lots of traffic in D.C. You understand you just recently left Los Angeles. Or I live in Baltimore. That's a little hop and a skip and a jump. Well, how much? I need to know. Am I just going to be there for a couple hours for a podcast? No. I'm going to preach at Aldersgate United Methodist that evening. Then we're going to have a happy hour before the podcast. Then we'll have a podcast. And for you, those travelers and things, if you want to hang, I am down to hang. See, I want you to know, if you get in the car and make time and stuff to come, that I want to hang out after, because I'm not going home. Raleigh's a long ways away. I'm going to be hanging there. And I don't know if this is true or not, but Tier told me, Tier Hardy of Crackers and Grape Juice, that Jason Michelli was going to buy everyone's drinks after the podcast when we go out. Yeah. I can't confirm this exactly, but I'm pretty sure Tier said that Jason wanted to buy everyone their first drink when we go out after. That's what he said. Kind of. Or I don't know. Nonetheless, there's that. Last, before we jump into the podcast, we're doing a giant book giveaway, Process Theology book giveaway. Friends at the Center for Process Studies and Process Century Press are giving 5, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 complete sets, 20 books of all the books that came out this past year. And that is 20 different process theology books that cover all sorts of different topics and angles and such. It's excellent. They're like $800 of process theology books you can win. And you get not just one winner, it's going to be 5 winners. And if you're the grand prize winner, you get those 20 books plus 5 by Marjorie Sue Hockey, 5 by John Cobb, and 5 by David Ray Griffin. You're going to get them. That's 15 plus 20 is 35. I can add. That is a book giveaway worth getting in. And conveniently, it ends 2 weeks before Christmas. So you could have 35 books of process brilliance showing up at your door. Now, let's say you're a Bardian like Jason Michelli at Crackers and Grape Juice. Maybe you are. Or maybe you're Sarah Heath, who helped keep us up late last night at the Fuller House, and you went to Duke, and you're a little too friendly with the Hauerwas, and you weren't even interested in process till you met John Cobb, and then you said, oh, John Cobb came to beer camp. Now Sarah's like, I might want to give him a listen. He's so nice and cute and smart, and he quoted the Bible a lot, and he likes Jesus, and he just sounds so good. Mate, see, this is a good opportunity for the Bardians and for the Hauerwasians to enter, because you may find out that God wants to lure you onto team process by victory. Process people might not have a lot of determined things. We may not have this type of eschatological confidence Bart has. But we also know that lure is always present, and maybe that's how you're going to win. All right? So I'm just saying, Jason, Sarah, this could really be the beginning of something really beautiful. All right? Okay. Now, you're going to get to hear from my friend, Daniel Coleman, book, Presence of Process. Enjoy. Hello, Homebrewed Christianity listeners. This is Tripp, and I am talking to Daniel Coleman, who is the author of Presence and Process, A Path Towards Transformation. It's hard to be against transformation and stuff, and this is about faith and community. So, Daniel, I am excited to get to talk to you, And I'm interested in how you introduce this book to someone who isn't sitting around going, I'm really into process thought and trying to see the interconnections between the East and West and the changing nature of religious and spiritual communities. Like if that's just like not where you hang out, how do you introduce this book?
I would introduce it as beginning by looking at trends that are currently going on, primarily in North America, just because that's where I'm at, what I know, but spiritual trends that are going on, and what that means, and some speculation on where that might be going. So, for example, the decline of Christendom in the West, which has pretty much become undeniable now. Churches are shrinking. We see the rise of the nuns, the younger generation who describe their religious affiliation as nun. The corresponding rise of the duns, older, more mature Christians who are leaving the churches. So we see that sociological phenomena. And then alongside that, I think everybody in North America by now is probably aware of the rise of the mindfulness movement. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty hard to get away from now. Mindfulness is everywhere. It's being used now to market, fast food probably. And so what does that mean? And how do those two phenomena correlate to one another? That to me is kind of the initial, access point in describing what the book is about, because those are things that we can observe in our culture. Mm-hmm. And then what's the background of each of those trends, and how do they? What's the juxtaposition and the relationship between them? And then, of course, further down the road, it gets into, well, how does process theology play into that, and how does process theology speak to that?
So, when were you first introduced to meditation, contemplation, and these type of spiritual practices?
It's been a long, gradual road for me. I became a Christian when I was in my 20s. I was raised with no religious background at all. So in my 20s, I became a Christian and started attending church for the first time. And it happened to be kind of a charismatic fundamentalist form of Christianity, the Vineyard. Mm-hmm. Which back at that time in the 80s was really exploding, and that was the world that I lived in for a good 20 years. I gradually came to a point of sort of asking, is this it? Is this what it's all about? Listening to a guy give a sermon every Sunday, and listening to Christian radio, and listening to contemporary Christian music, and engaging in what Dallas Willard called personal sin management, and I just felt like I was dissatisfied with the transformation I was seeing in myself, and with my peers as well, including our leaders, and so I started to wonder, there must be something more. We always in that talked a lot about revival, and we looked forward to this great worldwide revival that was going to happen. And I started to think that there must be something that is not just in the future, this future event. There must be something now that, in my day-to-day life that can bring about the transformation that I seek, to be able to live a life really centered in God. Mm-hmm. And what is that? So that was the beginning of the quest, and it was a long quest. Eventually, it led me into starting a house church and doing the house church for a while. And a big part of that was getting rid of hierarchy and exploring the idea that everybody had something to contribute. And that was a wonderful experience. And then a little bit later, it led me to Quakers, as I researched, tried to figure out how to do this house church thing, mm-hmm. where everybody could participate and everybody's gifts. Everybody's voice was
like it's just a meeting among friends or something.
Yeah, exactly. It really was. Yeah, imagine that. And of course, yeah, looking at the New Testament descriptions of ecclesia and going, that's what we want to try to do. But I hadn't really seen that modeled before. So I did a lot of reading and research, and somewhere along the line, I stumbled upon some writings of Quakers and went, well, wow, it looks like they were doing what we're trying to do. And the Quakers called what they were doing primitive Christianity revived.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So that eventually led my wife and I into joining a Quaker meeting and becoming Quakers, which is the world we've been in for the last 12 years or so. And that then led into the introduction to Quaker spirituality, the idea of silent, expectant, waiting worship in a group, which is a very powerful experience, and other things that Quakerism teaches, such as group discernment, things like that. That eventually led to an interest in personal contemplative practices, in addition to the corporate contemplative practices that Quakers are known for. And that eventually led me into seminary and enrolling at a Quaker seminary. And that's where I really began to get exposed to contemplative spirituality in all kinds of different forms, both Christian and from other faith traditions.
Mm-hmm. So as a person, would you say that you were interested into it conceptually before experientially, or was it something you experienced and then you went looking for the history and the roots?
I think it was probably more of the second. I had experienced things, but I didn't know what name to give them.
Mm-hmm.
In the charismatic church that I've been part of for many years, there's definitely an emphasis on experiencing God, but it tended to be a very outward experience, and speaking in tongues or speaking out prophetic words and things like that. And I found that I always tended to be, I always tended to be drawn inward.
Mm-hmm.
And have this natural pull towards kind of a quiet, inward stillness, but I didn't know what that was. Interestingly, a really profound moment for me was in a class in seminary on interfaith dialogue. We were learning about Buddhism, and great, okay, concepts of Buddhism, Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, that's all great, all of this information. But then at a certain point, the professor said, well, let's try this Buddhist meditation thing, and gave us some very simple instructions, and everybody went off into a corner or another room or a quiet place and just tried it. And it was a really powerful experience for me. And it harkened back to those other experiences that I had had, and I sort of went, aha, and so that's when I began to be able to put some form and some language to what I had experienced.
Mm-hmm. So when there are people that I think like the idea of mindfulness and contemplation and that kind of thing, who have more books or have read more books about contemplation than actually have done it. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if there's in this work and in this period where you're seeing these different movements of kind of people coming out of more traditional Western forms of religion and into different types of spiritual practice and things, if there's not, I don't know, what is it about Western religion that would make us buy 6 books to read about contemplative practice and stuff, but maybe not spend one weekend in the year going to a silent retreat or something like that?
Yeah, that's a challenge that I face, because I'm very happy to read lots of books and and play with the concepts and do all of that. And it's very easy for me to get off into that and have to pull myself back to really where the rubber meets the road is with the practice itself. I think it's a real struggle for us Westerners, and perhaps even more so for Protestant Christians, because we're so used to consuming information as a primary aspect of our spiritual life. It's funny, actually, the next book that I hope to write, which will be sort of a sequel to Presence and Process, is going to be called Story and Practice. Mm-hmm. And it's going to explore this idea that, we're naturally drawn to narrative, to stories, to information. You open just about any introductory book on Buddhism, and it'll begin with a story about the Buddha. And as a Christian, of course, I was taught this story. The idea was to understand the narrative and get the narrative right about original sin and the fall and all of this, and God's covenant and the atonement and the end times and all of these things, and put it together. And that's naturally what we do. But Protestantism in particular, I think something that we sort of lost was practice, or maybe the story became overemphasized to the loss of the practice. And so that's something that I hope to explore more in my next book, is the idea of restoring more of a balance with the practice and the story. To practice, which is very apophatic, is letting go of rational thought and visualization. But at the same time, I naturally want to read and learn and research and glean information and organize it, do all of that.
So early in the book, you do a kind of introduction and really an unpacking of apophatic mysticism, and maybe you can introduce that to us and share what it was in kind of attending to and trying to describe and lay out this picture of apophatic mysticism that kind of rose in your awareness. Like, what were the facets and important elements of apophatic mysticism that stuck out when you read it, researched, and go like, I'm trying to introduce this to someone else, not like tell you about my best friend?
I think, and I apologize, the audio cut out a bit, so I may not have gotten all of your question there, but I think everybody is if you want to boil it down to the most basic thing, I think everybody's looking for happiness, for satisfaction, for a sense of peace, of shalom, of serenity, however you want to, everybody's looking for that. And various traditions, various viewpoints term that in different ways. But I think then apophatic practices, meditative, contemplative practices, in whatever milieu they come out of, whatever the form they take, seem to really help to foster that in a very tangible, experiential way, that one does begin to experience a sense of equanimity, a sense of serenity, a sense of a spaciousness within, as Martin Laird would say. And it's not a concept, it's a felt experience. There's a best-selling book by, I forget the author's name, but he is a newscaster, and he wrote a book called 10% Happier. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of his equation was, these types of practices seem to make me about 10% happier. And I don't know if I agree with the equation, but there is a tangible, felt, personal effect. I find that when I get busy and I sort of let my practice go, I don't really notice it until I get back to my practice, and all of a sudden, after a short period of time, it's like, okay, yeah. And I remember I sort of lost this sense and was becoming more and more agitated and anxious and caught up in my own thought life in my own head, and things like that.
So when you spent time researching the history of apophatic, mystical thinkers, the role of contemplation in the history of the church, what were some of the surprises or nuggets of excitement you want to take to the over textual, over logocentric Western church?
I think probably the biggest surprise, and it ends up being a key aspect of the book, was just the similarities. How in different times, different places, different cultures, there seems to be this common thread. That was really fascinating to me. Not just within the Christian setting, these different contemplative Christians in different times and places, but then you start to compare that again with the Buddhist or with the Sufis or with Judaism, etc., and you find these very common threads, and it's like people are speaking about the same experiences, but they're using the language that it comes out of their context. That was really surprising. Another one was as I started reading texts, the Cloud of Unknowing, or reading Pseudo Dionysius, or some of these folks, how relatable they were, that they weren't sort of very obscure, esoteric. The author of The Cloud of Unknowing feels to me like a guy I could call up on the phone, and talk to and ask questions about. It's so, just relatable.
Well, I don't think everybody wants to go hang out with, because isn't that Nicholas of Cusa? And that he's complicated. Someone does a lot of meditation when Nicholas of Cusa just seems like someone you want to hang out with. He's intimidating to show up on any syllabus. So what was going through your head when trying to introduce the kind of picture of Buddhist meditation, its history and things, to an audience who, a lot of us, our familiarity with Buddhism is like Western Buddhism. That has a certain slant to it that the tradition and its richness may not, be fully captured in.
Yeah. And this was a challenge for me, and something that I went back and forth on a lot in writing the book, was how much did I want to explore all of the various facets of Buddhism. For example, did I want to write a chapter or an appendix on the teachings of Buddhism and the Buddha? And ultimately, I decided not to do that. Instead, just to give some recommended reading on other books that I thought would do a better job of that. And that is a challenge because we're dealing with a 2,500-year-old tradition, lots of different forms of Buddhism, from Zen to Tibetan to Theravada to Pure Land to, all of these different forms. And I realized I was not going to be able to adequately encapsulate all of those into a chapter or two. So it would be better to simply say, if you want to explore this further, here are some great resources. But the starting point for me in the book, again, is the mindfulness movement. And so the mindfulness movement can be traced to a more westernized form of Buddhism. Another part of that is I wanted to explore the idea that it's okay for a Christian to explore Buddhism. It's okay for a Christian to also be a Buddhist. Paul Nitter's book, the eminent Catholic theologian Paul Nitter, who wrote a book called Without Buddha, I Could Not Be a Christian. I think that's the correct title. The idea that is it possible not only that Buddhism and Christianity could coexist in one's own faith life, but that they could inform and enhance one another? There could potentially be some challenges there if you follow a form of Buddhism that heavily emphasizes the speculative metaphysical aspects, such as reincarnation and karmic reward in future lives, and the panoplies of demons and gods and demigods and heavens and hells and all of this. Well, it would be difficult to reconcile that with being a Christian. But one of the interesting things about Western Buddhism now is there's a trend. It's come to be known as secular Buddhism, for lack of a better label. But what it's doing is sort of peeling back a lot of that religious speculative stuff that got layered on over time, and going back to what were the core things that the Buddha taught. And when you peel away that stuff, what you find is actually something that is much more based on here's what you can personally practice and experience, not so much on speculation about afterlives and all of this. And then it turns out it is quite compatible with being a Christian. As one author put it, it's sort of like if you're a mathematician and you want to play tennis, well, be a mathematician and play tennis. If you're a Christian and you find yourself drawn to Buddhism, it's quite possible to do that, to be both. There's a wonderful book that was recently published, and it came out after mine, so I didn't have a chance to put it in the recommended reading, but I really recommend it, and it's called Why Buddhism is True. Mm-hmm. The author is Robert Wright, and the title is a bit... If I read a book called Why Christianity is True, I would assume it would be an apologetic,
yeah,
evidence that demands a verdict kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But so it's a bit provocative, but really what he's getting at is when he talks about Buddhism, he's talking about the core historical teachings, as best we can tell, of the Buddha, kind of pared down to those basic things. And then by true, what he means is are reliable, are valid, are useful. And he's looking at it, right? It looks at this from the aspect of an evolutionary psychologist. Mm-hmm. So into why do our brains work the way that they do? What are neuroscientists finding out? And how does Buddhism fit in with that? And all of that you can look at, be fascinated by it, and agree with it, find that it's experientially valid to your own experience of life, the universe and everything, and still be a Christian and not have to compromise on your Christian faith. That is a possibility. I was reading Cobb and Griffin's Introduction to Process Theology, rereading it recently, mm-hmm. and there's a place where they start to touch on that, and the idea that the Christian church can perhaps learn a lot and benefit a lot from a deeper engagement with Buddhism.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Cobb has done a good job pointing out is that the seeking after enlightenment is significantly different than salvation. That enlightenment and salvation aren't the same thing. And when you recognize them as really different tasks, one is God's task and a gift, and a calling, and the other is a quest. Like the enlightenment and salvation not being identical, frees you to actually engage in both, in work towards both in real different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ancient Christian mystics would talk about infused contemplation as a gift of grace. This idea of through the contemplative endeavor, one gets to a point where they experience something that sounds remarkably like what the Buddhists talk about when they're talking about enlightenment or, nirvana. It's not an equivalent to heaven. It's something that you experience here and now, as a perception of things as the way that they are, and kind of a clearing away of a lot of illusions and delusions, and kind of a seeing clearly of things, and an experience of the absolute, whether we define that as God, or as the divine, or as the uncreated, as Buddhists might say.
Mm-hmm. So what role did kind of an interest in process thought and panentheism play in connecting the contemplative tradition of the West and the East?
I think it was interesting to me that as I was a ways down the road in exploring contemplative spirituality, again through that path, and I was then exposed to process theology, sort of by accident. And the first book I read was Catherine Keller's On the Mystery,
mm-hmm.
and didn't understand a lot of it, but something about it drew me. And unfortunately, the next book I came across was Robert Mesley's Introduction to Process Theology, which is still, if anybody ever asks me what's a good book to start off with, that's the one I always recommend. Mm-hmm. And it made so much sense to me. Again, in part because it corresponded to my own experience. Yeah, this is providing a theological, metaphysical, philosophical explanation for my lived experience in how I've experienced the world and the universe. And so it just clicked. That led me to, exploring it deeper. A challenge that I had with really getting into process theology was a lot of the language and the jargon. Somebody who was not coming from a deep philosophical background, it was laborious, mm-hmm. going through a lot of the texts and just trying to make sense of it and understand what do they mean by these various terms, prehension and concrescence, and there's an anecdote, and I don't know if it's true, about Whitehead delivering a lecture, I think in Chicago, and a lot of folks getting up and walking out, and they thought it was some kind of a put on because he was using so much jargon, some of which he sort of had to invent to try to explain the concepts. And I'm waiting for somebody, maybe you, to put out a Process Theology for Dummies book. That's the book that I was really looking for, and when I was starting out, and Mesley's book was about the closest thing I could find. And in a sense, in my chapter on process theology, that's sort of what I tried to do was eliminate as much of the jargon as possible, and it's still very difficult to do, but sort of do a process theology for dummies. When I'm learning something new, I tend to look for one of those, for dummies books, because they just deal with the basic concepts and explain things.
Mm-hmm. So how has the whole project that the book was a part of shaped the way you understand and practice your faith?
It's been huge, not just for me, but for my wife also, who mm-hmm. journeyed along with me, throughout this, and was a sounding board for me and my proofreader, and all of that. No, it's been huge, and in some ways, this book is a chronicle of my journey, not overtly, but that's sort of what's behind the scenes is the journey that I took as I began to be exposed to and learn about process theology and learn about contemplative spirituality, learn about the rich history of Christian contemplative practices, and learn about Buddhist meditative practices. And of course, learning about those also meant immersing myself in them and trying them out and practicing them, and joining a Buddhist sangha and hanging out with Buddhists and practicing with them as I still do, and hanging out with folks who practice centering prayer and Christian meditation and actually experiencing it for myself. And it was and remains hugely transformative.
So for people that may be in an ecclesiastical pit stop before where you are now, like with the Quakers and these deep friendships of learning across religious boundaries, what kind of advice do you give for someone that is interested in kind of expanding their boundaries or incorporating contemplative practice or engaging in like actually learning Buddhism from a Buddhist or this type of thing? Like what's the advice you would give yourself, years back when you started the journey?
Probably the first thing I would say is fear not. I was taught to be very fearful and suspicious of other faiths and of any kind of mystical or practice. And I was taught to be afraid of that. I was taught that those types of practices, be it centering prayer or be it Buddhist meditation, their goal is to have you clear your mind, and that leaves you open to demonic attack and influence and these types of things. So there was a great deal of fear, which built up a natural wall of resistance against even considering or exploring those things. So that's the first thing I would say is just fear not. Mm-hmm. There's a point in presence and process, or I make a point in presence and process of tying in some of the New Testament texts and Old Testament, Hebrew scriptural texts as well, that the early church fathers, that the desert monastics and such invoked to try to explain what was going on, how they saw Jesus doing and saying certain things and went, oh, this corresponds to our contemplative practices. And, one of the big ones is the idea that, Jesus talked about, it's not what goes into a person that defiles them, it's what comes out of them, it's the thoughts. And so the ancient Christian contemplative practice of watchfulness of thoughts, which is, again, very similar to Buddhist practices, of it's not a matter of not thinking, it's a matter of observing and being aware of your thoughts, mm-hmm. and sort of letting them come and go without engaging them. It gives you this distance from the thought. So that's really a big one that I would say. And the second one is that I would tell somebody who's interested in looking into these things is just do it. Go and find a course in Vipassana. The first Vipassana class I took was at a Unitarian Universalist church that was near my house. It was a 9-week class that met once a week. And of course I went in very, sort of, I don't know about this stuff. This is going to be weird. And found that, no, this isn't weird at all. It's, it was very, very engaging. So, I'd say, fear not and just do it. So step in, get your feet wet, check it out, see if it fits.
Mm-hmm. So what has been the, you've mentioned a couple times that this, journey of transformation from becoming a Christian, being a part of the charismatic movement, all the way into, being a Quaker and being engaged in multi-faith, that your wife and you have been sharing that journey and stuff. I know a lot of people that listen to the podcast are in the middle of that process and would definitely want to have their partner be more of a part of it and share in it. And also you want to give freedom for people you love to have their own experience and go through the thing. What kind of advice would you give for those who are in faith transition and wanting to share it and encourage their partner, but not determine or force or something like that.
Yeah, that's difficult because, of course, every relationship is different, and the dynamics between partners in a relationship, is unique to that relationship. So it's difficult. Other than I would say that, for example, something that's encouraged me in my practice has been seeing the effects on my wife in her practice. And oftentimes it's things that she doesn't even realize, she's not aware of. But I kind of step back and go, wow, she has really gained some equanimity here. She's really, this thing that used to set her off,
Mm-hmm.
that now when this thing comes at her, she's like, okay, what am I going to do with this? And gosh, so perhaps one answer might be is pursuing the practice for yourself and let the results of that speak for themselves. And perhaps one's partner might begin to say, I noticed that you just seem to be more. There's something going on there, and I'd be interested in finding out a bit more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe trying it out with you. So that might be one answer.
So, one of the other things that kind of crossed my mind is like just the practical part of making mindfulness a part of your routine and things. Mm-hmm. So, like at different points in your life and different times and things, what have been some of the ways that you've managed to get a rhythm so that you keep coming back to it?
Yeah, that is a huge, that seems to be something that folks bring up the most as the greatest challenge is continuing in the practice. And what I found, at least it works for me, is it comes down to routine. I'm a musician. And so as a musician, I had to learn how to practice my instrument so that I could develop skill at my instrument. And that I found that what seems to work best for me in that endeavor likewise is to have routine. This is the time that I do this. This is the place where I do this. And this is sort of a process that I follow in doing it. And likewise with contemplative meditative practice. So for me, what that means is I get up an hour early. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning, which is not something I'm naturally inclined to do. And I have a particular chair that I use. I'm a bit too old and stiff to do the sitting on a cushion thing. So I have a particular straight back chair that I use. I have an app on my iPad, and it's following that routine. And the times I'm most likely to fall off on my practice is on weekends or when I'm traveling, because all of a sudden I've lost my routine, and so it's more challenging then. So it's interesting. The poet Rumi wrote something about and who had nothing to do with mindfulness in the Buddhist context, but he wrote something to the effect of, if you want to see transformation in yourself, get up earlier and do it. That's a huge extreme paraphrase, but I kind of took that and I referred to it as the Rumi challenge. I'm going to do the Rumi challenge for the next 30 days. I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock every morning, splash some cold coffee on my face, and just do it. Sit for 20 minutes and meditate. Once I got that going, then it became easier to sustain, as long as I had that routine available to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've enjoyed the book, and I hope everyone checks it out and getting to see your face. Not that everyone listening is, but also interact. Is there anything that I didn't ask about, or something else you wanna share, throw in stuff before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say that as a listener to Homebrew Christianity for some time now, I just really appreciate your interest and support in the book, and it was incredibly encouraging to me that you liked it. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. Well, I hope that doesn't mean everybody that's listening that I've not liked every book people have sent me. So then I have to work on creative ways of giving encouragement. And I've been told I'm not good. I'm not good at buttering a criticism, but, so yeah, everybody check out, Presence and Process, and it's Daniel Coleman. When you go on to wherever you order your books and such, you can also you can click over from the episode link. And is there anywhere else you want to direct people on the internet to find you?
Well, it can be ordered through fine booksellers everywhere. So support your local bookstore. And it's also orderable through the chains and through Amazon, etc. Yeah, my website is danielpcoleman, COLEMAN.com. That's sort of just my jumping off website. And from there's a link to my blog. There's a link to the Facebook page, and a link to Amazon. So yeah, that's a good spot, a good jumping off point. danielpcoleman.com.
It was great talking to you.
Likewise.